Welcome to What the Decks, where over the course of a lunch hour, we take the idea for a deck build from lunchbox to deck box. Today, we won't be building a deck, so the idea instead that we'll be taking uh, together over lunch, maybe not necessarily into the deck box of the traditional sense, but the deck box of knowledge, if you will. The deck box of equipping ourselves with a better understanding of things to come is going over the Embergard rulebook today. So we have that in hand, and I'm not going to be paging through it today, like page by page or anything like that. Instead, what I'm hoping for, what I just wanted to do is start a Q&A. Just try to answer any questions that people have. If we're not finding like an abundance of questions, then I'll go over some stuff. Hopefully organically. Today's format is just I mentioned at the end of the last episode, the celebration and hiatus, that I wouldn't be able to stay away, and that I'd want to be able to do a one-off episode here or there when I could find the time and energy. And yeah, so here we are today, and I see chat already lighting up. It's starting with a good day from Wellner, the only way to properly start a What the Decks episode. And Jake, Jungle Camper, Brian, thanks all for joining me. Yeah, so out the gates, if there's anything that you want to know about the new edition that I can answer, questions about how the warbands work, how the rulings on particular cards, or rulings from the rulebook itself, let me know. Like, the rulebook is going to be the focus of today, and we're going to get cozy with it. You'll notice it's cold here in Wisconsin already, and so I'm feeling the coziness of hanging out here in a hoodie. And I figured that was a fun vibe for today, to get cozy with the rulebook and chat and just go through it. Yeah. So first things first, I suppose, if you're new to Underworlds, welcome. Super excited to have you as a member of the community going forward. You've come into the game at the perfect time. A new edition is always a great point to start a game, especially when it retains so much spirit that once was there. You don't have to worry about any catch up. You can come in with the rest of us and get excited with us. Jonathan Betton, can you explain Grievous versus Crit Grievous? Absolutely. Okay, so that'll be the first thing we dive into. So for those first aficionados out there, Grievous was handled a little differently in the previous game, which is why it'll be a memory scar for us players that are coming from the previous edition. If you're new to Underworlds, you're not, like, this isn't going to hit you at all. You're totally going to track it and have it be able to run with it from the get-go instead of having to like rewire yourself. I suppose one thing before we get to Crit Grievous is I wanted to show a few resources out there that have already been stood up by community members that are awesome. So particularly if instead of starting in on the wide camera angle, boom, like this, I wanted to start in as we traditionally started every episode previously, which was coming in on our deck builder. That's right, the great Mcrat, who is the individual that runs Underworlds DB, has updated it so that we can get ready to start building decks digitally and get into Underworlds from here on out. He also has gone through great trouble to retain both versions of the game. So if your deck lists aren't lost from first edition, they're still here for you. And you just go over to this Underworlds DB 1.0 tab. Here's where everything that we've built on the show lives. I'm gonna catalog these and get them out. I think your save file will get muddied. Like these are version 1 decks, sure, but I can save version 2 decks into here. So I'll clear this all out and archive it. But if you're new to Underworlds with Embergard here, this is the deck builder that I prefer. I love it. It's always been here for us. Mkrat's always quick to update it. As a member of the What the Hex podcast, I'm proud to say we were able to send over the imagery that Phil was able to iron out for our release. So all of this crisp imagery is a thanks to Phil. And we were able to share that with Mkrat and get that as the imagery that is up on Underworlds DB. Also, you'll notice, we've only got one format here, which means when you hit refresh data, boom, is it snappy, because it doesn't have years and years of other entries. So that's really, really cool. The other resource I wanted to just highlight that is already good to go is the Nemesis deck library by Battle Mallet. So if you've been watching my show previously, you know that I'm super honored to have each deck that we build on the show featured in the Nemesis deck library here on Battle Mallet. But more importantly than the decks we build here getting up here is just its existence. This is such a cool resource out there. This is how people can just grab a deck that exists, build it real quick, put the cards together based on what's here. So like if I were to click into the treasure was all mine for Ziket's Tunnel Pack, here's my deck list. I can jump straight into it and get playing this game. So this helps people play Underworlds faster. It helps people explore Underworlds and just grab decks that have been built by others and have some confidence that it's a good first step. Lots of love for Battle Mallet Nemesis Library. Lots of love going forward for it as well. It's a fantastic resource for the community. So that's up and running. Underworlds DB is up and running. And if you're a fan of the What the Hex content, we also have the 6 blogs and an episode covering the latest content. So that all feels we're all really proud of kicking off a new edition right with all of you and being able to share all these moments with you. So, all right, let's go. There was the first question here from Jonathan Benton. So, Grievous and Crit Grievous, how do they differ? So, in the previous edition, and this is where these scars come in, Grievous was an ability that meant if you got a crit in your offensive roll, then you were going to be adding a damage. That is not the case anymore. So we got to take that out. What Grievous means now is it is a weapon ability. You're only able to take one weapon ability with you into combat. Grievous used to stack. Like you used to have Grievous 1 or 2, and then you could combine those numbers. And if we were combining a 1 and a 2, we'd have Grievous 3. We're dealing 3 extra damage if we see a single crit in combat. Again, pull that out. We're not doing that anymore. You can bring one weapon ability with you into combat. Things like Cleave and Ensnare are also weapon abilities. So you have to decide before you roll those attack dice, am I going to use Cleave here for more accuracy, or am I going to use Grievous here? And Grievous means I will add a damage to my damage characteristic for this attack. So we're still adding a damage. But if it says Grievous, it is 1 damage, period. If it says Crit Grievous, then you have to find the crit to unlock that damage. So crit is going to precede many weapon abilities, not just Grievous. So crit could come before Cleave as a weapon ability. And so you might have on your profile, hey, crit Cleave or Grievous. And maybe you already have enough damage to take down the target. You just really need it to go through. You're probably not picking Grievous. You're probably picking Crit Cleave in that example. And you are hoping for a crit so that you can unlock and bring that ability online that you've chosen as you make that attack. So you're always choosing one keyworded weapon ability as you come in. And then if it has crit before it, you need a crit in that roll to activate it. Now, let's revisit that example that I just gave. If you are choosing between Crit Cleave and Grievous, and you think to yourself, I have exact damage, let's say damage 2. I have 2 damage, and that's how much health they have remaining. That's actually a really interesting situation to be in, because yes, Crit Cleave might put that damage through. However, if they roll more crits in their defense roll than you, and this is something new that we always have to think about now, if they roll more crits in defense, they will unlock Stand Fast, which will reduce the damage they're receiving by 1 to a minimum of 1. All of a sudden, you were going for accuracy. Maybe it didn't go off, but you still were able to push the attack through. I attacked with 3 dice. I chose Crit Cleave. I did not get a crit, but I got 3 successes. Whatever. I probably don't need Crit Cleave with 3 successes anyways. That's going through. They've only got 1 or 2 defense dice. We'll say 2 defense dice. They roll. Missing a crit. Well, shit. I don't normally swear on the channel. Apologies. But they rolled a crit. So that means they have 1 more crit than I do. That's still only 1 basic success. It's a wild success with some unlock and juiciness around it. But I have 3 successes. They have 1. My attack's going through. But they rolled a crit, and I did not. So they get Stand Fast in their defensive role, or like as a defender, and they're going to reduce the damage. All of a sudden, my 2 damage that I thought was 100% going to kill is not. And if I had chosen Grievous, just Grievous, it would have brought along +1 damage. So into the swear jar. Yep, my bad. And so that's really fascinating. What that also means, you might see Grievous as something that they add onto fighters as a weapon ability, instead of just bumping the damage up. So I've been thinking about this. If you have a damage profile of, let's say, 2, they could just put Grievous on there instead, like maybe when they inspire. Like, hey, we want to give this fighter an extra damage here when they inspire, but for balance purposes, just taking that number up to 3 isn't quite what we want to do. Okay, how do we do that? We could give it Grievous, and now they have an attack that's coming through that's dealing 2 damage. If they select Grievous as their weapon ability, it's doing 3. That means a couple things. They're not getting any other weapon abilities, and if they found another source of Grievous in like an upgrade, giving it to this fighter does nothing because Grievous doesn't stack. So by giving a fighter Grievous as a weapon ability, you're increasing their damage output when you select it, but that's as far as it goes. Unless you have something else that adds damage in a way that isn't Grievous. And I don't know if that exists. I don't think that exists today. So let me know if you have any follow-up questions, Jonathan. That's weapon abilities are going to be one of those things that take a lot of getting used to for those coming from first edition, and I think are going to be a breeze to understand for those jumping in now. Let's see. From Wellner here, what do you feel the most major or relevant basic rule changes? Hold on. I'm going to give Jonathan a chance. I just saw him respond here. Super edge case. If I get 1 crit with Crit Grievous and 2 successes attack, opponent gets 2 crit defense, Stand Fast, but no change in damage, +1, -1. Correct. Okay. So that's a great example. So we'll use the 3 attack dice and the 2 defense dice example again, and we'll spell out what Jonathan just said. I throw my attack of 3 dice, and on it I get a single crit and 2 successes. Okay. Well, good news. My opponent only has 2 defense dice, and I just got 3 successes. I know this is going through. I just don't know yet how much damage it's going to do. I rolled 1 crit. Therefore, any of my abilities that are crit weapon ability, like Crit Grievous in Jonathan's example, have now activated. I'm going to get them. So that 1 crit in my 3 successes means my 2 damage attack is now 3. Fantastic. They roll their 2 defense dice. They now roll 2 crits. Uh-oh, they have more crits than me. What just happened? Well, your attack is still going through, but it did just reduce the damage by 1 with stand fast because the defender rolled more crits than the attacker. So essentially, you have a wash. That Crit Grievous, you activated, it gave you +1, and then stand fast reduced it to 2. And so if you only needed 2 damage to push through on that target, that might be a worthy weapon ability to choose to try to guarantee that even if they get stand fast against you, you're pushing the damage through to the health capacity that you're trying to hit. So planning for an overkill of 1 is not a bad idea in general in the new edition, because then you don't have to worry about stand fast. But it seems that damage has been reduced overall and health has been brought up a little bit. So you're going to have to take more time to take down targets, I think. And you're going to have like a lot of chipping away at a target to like actually pull them off the board. Let's see, Jonathan, are there any rules abilities that we don't have cards, warbands, examples yet? I think raise might be one. Yeah. So as far as the rulebook goes, the only thing in here that I don't think we've seen something for is raise, as you said. Just double checking. So right here, this is what Crit Grievous looks like on Crit Attack. So Grievous is now an icon or a rune mark that you'll see alongside a weapon profile. Grievous is this skull getting split in 2, and if a crit is right before it, tagged along with it, that means, hey, you need a crit to activate it. If the skull was on its own, you wouldn't need a crit to activate it. But this could be any of the weapon abilities here. This one just happens to be Grievous, right? It could be Crit Cleave as another example, or to continue forward with that example. Yeah, so we also don't see grapple on these fighters. Grapple's a cool new rule. And I thought it was going to be the counter to guard, because I've been noticing that guard is like all powerful. So if I take the time to put a fighter on guard, then the only way my opponent is doing something about that fighter is if they kill it. So all of a sudden Cleave and Ensnare need to do some more work to like get that fighter down, or use some sort of ability that expressly says that you can push an enemy fighter. So like let's see, there's a card in Countdown to Cataclysm, for example, that will let you. I think it's called Violent Blast. Yeah, Violent Blast. Pick a stagger hex, push each fighter within 1 hex of that stagger hex, 1 hex. So this could let you push enemy fighters, even if they have a guard token, right? Anything that says push fighter doesn't care about them having a guard token, unless we're talking about drive back, right? So when you attack a target in this game and you succeed on the attack, or you tie the attack, you get access to something called drive back. Drive back is a push, but not all pushes are drive backs. It's like the square and the rectangle thing, right? Square is a rectangle isn't a square. So a drive back is a push is not a drive back. Guard says you can't be driven back. So if somebody were to tie an attack against you, succeed in attacking against you while you have a guard token, you can't be pushed. This isn't new for us coming from first edition. This is how guard works. Guard also increases your defense because it now says, hey, I know you were only looking for, and this is like huge on the tunnel pack. I know you were only looking for dodge before, but now shields and dodge work for your defense. So I thought grapple was going to be our new tool to deal with that, because we used to have knockback. Knockback used to cut through it. Grapple it wasn't called grapple in the previous game. Some fighters had it, and it was worded in such a way where it dealt with guard. Like it was like, hey, when you get to the drive back step, instead like push them. And the way that was worded, it let you push a fighter that was on guard because you weren't driving them back. During the drive back step, you were expressly not driving them back. You were instead pushing them. And so grapple, let's read this. Let's see. It is on page 15. Page 15. Grapple. If a target can be driven back, it goes through the trouble of writing that out. If a fighter can be driven back, they can be pushed 1 hex instead. And so that means grapple doesn't help us with guard. Nothing helps us with guard positionally during your action step. Like you need, when you take a look at the core abilities that you have available to you and the weapon abilities that might be on fighters, you don't have a tool for guard. You have to kill that fighter, or you have to have some sort of card ability that can push them. And I think that's really big. But yeah, we don't see grapple initially on any of the fighters here. I think we see it in a card or two, but I'm not sure. I'd have to page through the 4 decks there. So the other thing that was mentioned that we don't see yet is raise. So I'll go over raise as well. By the way, so I love this. In the back of the book, we have an index now. And previously we had a glossary there, but the glossary was doing its darndest. I almost added to that swear jar again. The glossary was doing its darndest to redefine the rule outside of the context you would normally find it in the rule book. So it would try to do it in fewer words. I would try to streamline this definition real quick in the glossary and give it to you in a non-verbatim way that the rulebook was already giving it to you in. And so sometimes those things would come in conflict for each other or become vaguer as a result of the glossary entry. Now we just have an index that says, hey, here's where the rule lives. And frankly, that's fine. I'm okay with that. I would rather that than have something that creates more ambiguity or contradictions. But yeah, so raise is on page, oh, hey, they don't actually have it called out in the index. So, I mean, that's obnoxious. I've actually noticed that already with flanked and surrounded. You can't go to the index and look up flanked. I don't know why. I feel like there was a miss there. Instead, at the bottom, there is an index of rune marks and symbols. So right here is an index of rune marks and symbols where those are mentioned. And you would think hey, just next to each one of these would be a page number. That would be awesome. No, not the case, but that's okay. It's yeah, this exists and this is what the symbol looks like. So having a whole legend of symbols there, very nice. But it could go further. So there's rune marks is covered on page 9. So I'm gonna go see if raise is called out here. No, not raise specifically. Okay, let's go to the advanced expanded rules. Expanded rules, here we are. Raise. Some abilities, this is page 20, allow fighters to be raised. When this happens, the raised fighter is placed in an empty hex specified by the ability, so it will tell you where to put the fighter. A raised fighter is given a raised token and has a bounty characteristic of 0. Now, something else to keep in mind with this is how do you get to a state where you're going to be raised? We don't have anything yet that gives a raised token. It would be really interesting design to explore. A raised fighter is given a raised token and has a bounty characteristic of 0. I guess rules is written. It doesn't say, hey, if you have a raised token, that equals being raised. It says, hey, if you're raised, get a raised token. It's kind of like a reminder, right? But if it was synonymous, if it went both ways, they could explore giving somebody a raised token, which would set their bounty characteristic to 0. But that is not how it is written. So don't let me confuse you. How it is written right now is when you are raised, you get a raised counter, and your bounty characteristic goes to 0. But in order to be raised, you had to have been dead first. So let's go to slain and see what happens when we're slain. If a slain, page 16, if a fighter has a number of damage tokens equal to or greater than their health characteristic, that fighter is slain. Immediately remove the slain fighter and their tokens from the battlefield. Remove all tokens from their fighter card and each of their upgrades. Discard that fighter's upgrades, and then uninspire, there it is, that fighter. Slain fighters cannot use abilities and cannot contribute towards scoring objective cards unless specified otherwise. Finally, ignore slain fighters for all rules unless specified otherwise. So what I wanted to cover there was you're losing your upgrades. That's big. That's new. But I think that's been covered in large by a lot, all of like the content creator reviews so far. But uninspiring your fighter is also something that's happening there for you. And that's interesting because that means unless your raise mechanic says otherwise, you're not coming back inspired. You're having to start that inspire route over for that fighter. And that's interesting. So there's two rules, grapple and raise, that aren't initially available to us. Unless grapple is available in one of these decks, which it might be. Here, hold on. Let's see. Nope, grapple is not available to us yet either. I had a feeling that I could query grapple here if it was here. So, okay. Let's take a look at chat. I see grapple popping out here in chat. So this is Spinnerite. The warbands in the box don't have grapple, do they? No, neither of them. That's what I was thumbing through here. We would see that here. What would the symbol look like? Whoop! I hit the microphone. Actually, it's like the third time I've hit the microphone. I hope that's not like creating a lot of noise. It is a swoop to the up and the right. So frankly, it's going to be visually something to like keep track of because it kind of looks like dodge the other way. And these symbols, in my experience, are a little too small on the fighter cards. I wish they were bigger. So let me see if I can't get this to focus. No, that's not going to focus. And frankly, I should probably blow up the camera if I'm going to try something like that. But it's not going to work. But yeah, an arrow swinging to up and to the right is grapple. Flying is not something we have yet. Is that true? Tell you what, I mentioned scars coming from first edition. I have them. Yeah, it does not look like we have any flying yet. So I guess given that, let's read flying. How is flying in the new rules? Okay, so is this a rune mark that I can look up in the index? So it's got its icon down here. It does. Flying is covered on page 20. So they're kind of inconsistent with that. Okay. Flying. Fighters with the flying rune mark can move through occupied... Wait, hold on. Yes. Fighters with the flying rune mark can move through occupied hexes and are not affected by stagger hexes while using the move ability. If you're brand new to the game, straightforward. If you're not brand new to the game, your scars include thinking that you can fly through blocked hexes. You can't. And if you think about our setting, we're underground. A lot of the times these blocked things are pillars, columns. They touch the ceiling too. So you can fly through an occupied hex, not a blocked hex. That's going to be one of your scars when you're thinking about flying coming from first edition. Your other scar is the relationship with snare hexes. You actually ignore them in this edition. That's awesome. In the previous edition, a flyer could not ignore the effects of a snare hex. You would still be staggered. So again, rewire and realize that I can't fly through that blocked hex. But you know what? Doesn't matter. I can go through that stagger hex. I think they're called stagger hexes now. That's also going to be a scar. I can go through that stagger hex and not worry, not take that on. I think stagger. Yeah, it's called stagger hexes now. So if I could lament, there are terms that have become clearer in the new edition and terms that have become less clear in the new edition. So I like when a name is divorced from other relationships with it. Let me explain. So in the previous game, we had objectives and objective cards. And if you ever taught a new player, that always comes up. Always. You have to explain that even though they're named objectives, they don't inherently provide any scoring value. They only provide scoring value or any value if a card tells you they do. So moving them to be named treasure in this new edition and objectives to be named objective cards, I love, right? So you hear the word objective, you know we're talking about cards in the new edition. Wounds were also confusing. You had a wound characteristic, which was your capacity for wounds, and you took on wounds until that capacity was reached, and then you were out of action. You were dead. Now it's health and damage, way clearer, because taking on wounds against a wound characteristic just isn't the most intuitive thing. Something I also ran into with new players. Those are the two easiest examples to like highlight and like clunky word association problems in the first game. And as you, Davey mentions this on the podcast, as you get to playing, those like fall into the background. You don't think about them anymore once you learn them, but they were a barrier. And we had snare hexes that staggered. So you would get a stagger token for going through a snare hex. I liked that from a naming standpoint. I get that we can probably deduce from a stagger hex that you're getting staggered. It's fine. It's probably not the most egregious example, but something like, so we used to have a fighter is taken out of action and a fighter is out of action. And those sound very similar. Is out of action means you're off the board. Taken out of action means you were taken off the board. So small difference there that we had conversationally. Both of those things are now slain. A fighter is slain. What does that mean? Well, that either means that they're out of action or that they were taken out of action. And so we used to have clearer language there. And that's okay. Like these will be things where they'll generate questions that could have been avoided if the terms were separate. But hopefully as we play, they fall into the background like the previous things did. And just to like not speak from complete memory there. Slain is on page 16. Let me look this up. Okay, slain. Slain. If a fighter... Oh, we already went over this. But if a fighter has a number of damage tokens equal to or greater than their health characteristic, that fighter is slain, right? And then immediately remove the slain fighter and their tokens from the battlefield. But there is no checking in cards for like fighters that are off the battlefield. It's fighters that are slain. So they could have kept that differentiator here and been clear. I also find flanked. Flanked is our new name for when you have one support alongside a fighter, and then surrounded is also the new word for if you have two fighters adjacent to an enemy. And I think they had done a pretty good job of figuring out how to talk about if a fighter is providing support or not, and they're gonna kind of have to figure out that language again. But okay, let me get off the language like speed bumps and talk more about the good stuff. So to do that, I'm running a little behind in chat here. So let's jump back up a little. Here's a dumb one. It's not a dumb one, I promise, from Jake here. Can I get confirmation that the raised tokens are the generic tokens on the other side? I think so. I'm pretty confident so. Yes. Yes. So you either have a generic like amber, that like ember stone, orange, yellow, and then on the other side a purple raise token, or you have a like shiny toxic green generic token, and on the back side of that is a purple raise token. Fun little detail. All of your raise tokens are now your generic tokens, which makes more sense. They were previously like generic token. I mean, I can see either use case. They were like one color generic token on one side, one color on the other. And so each token could be used as one or the other, but now they're raise or generic. It was probably better the other way, frankly. But it's okay. All the tokens got smaller too. All the circular ones. Square tokens, totally the same size. All the circular tokens, much smaller. Very, very baby little glory tokens and activation tokens. Okay. What do you feel the most major or relevant basic rule change is? This is from Wellner. Most relevant or most major basic rule change? I think it's crits. I think the answer has to be crits there. We go over in the latest What the Heck's episode, 154. I think we named it New Edition, Same Underworlds. And in there we go over what we think the hallmark changes are. The boards being removed is a hallmark change, but I think you feel that change less than you feel the change of crits. Crits is another one. Bounty, all your war bands now have a bounty value of 7 across their fighters, instead of each one providing 1 and then 2 if they're at a health value of 5 or more. That's how it used to be. Like, take that, remove it. Health does not affect their bounty anymore. It's a separate stat. That's really cool. What were the other hallmark changes? I can actually bring that up on my side real quick. Harder to remember them off the cuff. Let's see. War Scroll instead of Faction Decks. That's huge, but that's huge outside of the game, not while you're playing the game. And I am very hot on this change. I was very cold initially. It broke my heart when I first heard it. And the more I thought about it, the more I liked it. Because I really like being able to build with 2 decks. I mean, you were building with 2 decks before, and one of them was a faction deck, and that was where all the flavor was coming from. was the fighter cards and the faction decks. But I guess just to state in the moment, this is where this question was asking me to steer. But like, you've got two extremely clear advantages to me. You have, if I want to go play a game against somebody, all I need, and like, I want to play a competitive game. Let's say I want to go to a tournament. But this is true of all games of Underworlds and Embergard. I just need to know the current card pool, right? So when the core box releases, I just need to know Emberstone Sentinels. What is it? Emberstone Sentinels, Pillage and Plunder, Blazing Assault, and Countdown to Cataclysm. If I know those cards, I'm competitive. And then when I sit down and introduce myself to you and my warband to you, you're going to introduce your warband to me. The thing I need to read the most, the war scroll. I don't need to individually sit there and read through your fighter cards. They don't have abilities on them. They have stats. And I can see those. I could see those a little clearer if they took advantage of the amazing amount of space they have on these fighter cards now. They actually shrunk the numbers, and I don't know why. Like, they have way more space, and yet they made the numbers smaller, so they're harder to see across the table. That's a miss. But you like, it's still totally navigatable and reasonable, and maybe that means you push the fighter cards up a little closer to your opponent. You've got more space at the table now because of the new board's rules, just to make sure that you can very crystal clearly see all the numerical values you need to, and the little symbols like next to an attack, you want to know what those are too. But when you sit down to a game of Underworlds, if you know the card pool, you know everything you need to know going into that game. You can learn the warband off the war scroll, and then that's all you need to know. I think that's just an awesome way to build our tournaments. I don't have to worry about a player coming in not wanting to come to a tournament because they don't know all of the 58 warband decks, and so they're worried they're going to come up against 5 opponents that all have warbands that they're not familiar with, and so they won't know what tricks are coming. That won't be the case. The tricks are public for that specific warband. The rest is in the universal pool. I love that. That is so cool. And I'll take it. As long as they can take a good amount of that faction's identity and what made them feel fresh and interesting and put it in the war scroll, and I believe they can, then I'm happy. I do miss objectives. I'll state that for the record. I miss faction objectives. How do you win a game of Underworlds? You win a game through scoring objectives and getting glory and getting bounty. So whoever has the most glory at the end of a game of Underworlds wins, right? You get that through objectives. You get that through bounties. You used to have, every faction used to be able to speak to that picture, used to contribute to that picture in a unique and interesting way. And I felt that defined a warband more than their unique abilities, and that weren't tied to scoring. So I think the unique abilities do a lot to express identity, but they fall short of what an objective tells you that warband wants to be doing, and an interesting thing that warband can bring to the game that you have to be mindful of. So I know GW is extremely open to feedback. So that is feedback that I have shared, and whatever feedback that you have, I encourage you to share it. I've gone to enough of these events and spoken to enough GW people in person that I've learned they read every one of your emails and they take the feedback to heart. So if there's something that doesn't jive with you, let them know. They can use that. Maybe not now, maybe later. And maybe they disagree. And that's fine too. But just know that you're heard. And I think that's awesome. Like, this edition is probably a coalescence of all the lessons they learned by listening to you. And that's awesome. And so if you have any feedback, any at all, I can't encourage you enough to share. So much so that I'm gonna find the feedback email, and I'm gonna link it or pin it as the top comment to this stream today. But okay, so last couple of things about War Scrolls, and then we'll jump back into chat. So the other couple things I love about War Scrolls is that there were two. That you have those cards essentially available to you from the beginning. Like if you think about each ability on a War Scroll as a card that you could have in your hand if it was a faction card instead, you have to wait until you draw that in first edition. In this edition, it's right there for you. And figuring out when the right time to use that is interesting and can be frankly difficult. Like, do I hold it another round? Before, you'd feel the pressure of like wanting to get new cards into hand, and you'd have to weigh, is this better than any card I could draw? That would help you save that card into your hand. You don't have that choice anymore. So you have to think like, is this the right moment? Because if I wait, is a better moment going to come? And so you have to feel out when that works. So there's this interesting tension and player expression in the fact that you just always have your faction cards, if you will, available to you. The other thing, and this one's short and sweet, is that by moving everything in language to a War Scroll, that is such an easy place to make errata, and I'm excited for that as well. You don't have to worry about errataing multiple fighter cards or errataing fighter cards in a faction deck or putting them on a banned and restricted list, stuff like that. So War Scrolls, I was so cold on when I first heard as an announcement because it meant the loss of a faction deck, and I was sad to hear them go. And it's one of my number one highlights for the game now. Like, I think it is. I've completely flipped on my feelings towards War Scrolls. I think it's awesome. So yeah, hallmarks of the new edition: War Scroll, 1 board instead of 2, 7 bounty across warbands, crits is easily the biggest change here outside of the faction decks, and I think it's the one that you're going to feel the most game to game. And Nemesis is 2 universal decks now instead of faction decks. Those are kind of what we called out as the hallmarks. I think you'd easily add more, like weapon abilities could be its own hallmark, stuff like that. Okay, chat's exploding. Let's keep going. Okay, I'm gonna try to pull a little bit from the most recent and then go back up. Kevin here, couldn't they use timing windows with slain as a rule keyword? Like if a fighter was slain in the last action step as a replacement for taken out of action? Yes. And I hope that's the tradition that we see going forward, or like in general. So like right now, there are 9 cards that reference slain fighters. It looks like 8 of them are objectives. So Extinction's Edge here. This is the upgrade, so I wanted to kind of start here. Immediately advance your Cataclysm tracker after an enemy fighter is slain by this fighter. That feels very straightforward. The context is present. And so as long as the context is present, the words, the word can be both things. It's just... There's a difference between the act of slain and a status of slain, but context matters. Let's see. So after an enemy fighter is slain, so is slain. How many of these are is slain? Here, let's do it this way. Is slain. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4. The rest, let's see. Score this in end phase if 4 or more fighters are damaged and or slain. So here's an example where slain doesn't mean is slain. It means they are in the status of dead. But context is clear here. So frankly, it might be one of those things where like I started making assumptions based off of how clunky our wording was in first edition, and they're doing such a tremendous job of trying to make the wording less clunky, more streamlined here. If no friendly fighters... Okay, so I think this is the one that maybe sparked all the conversation for me. Lost in the depths, or all the mental stuff. Scores in end phase if no friendly fighters are adjacent. So are adjacent to what? because it doesn't specify, I assume adjacent to themselves. I think that's a totally fair understanding. And then any friendly fighters are not slain. We used to have surviving. I don't think we see the word surviving anymore. Yeah. So we don't have surviving friendly fighter or surviving enemy fighter. We have are not slain. And that took a minute to get used to. Maybe these are all scars from first edition, and that's not a problem. I think if you're coming into this game right now, you have a much easier time at understanding some of this, like from the get-go. And don't let me intimidate you, overwhelm you with any sort of like language scars that I'm experiencing, because like the game is too fun not to explore it. And I think you can make a reasonable guess at the wording rather quickly. But yeah, this one took me a moment because are not slain was something weird for me to get used to. I'd say Lost in the Depths is just poorly templated. Chop. I knew it was you. I was gonna get in the habit of accidentally calling you Kevin, so I just embraced it instead of calling you Chop. But yes. Thanks for tuning in, by the way. Okay. So here we go. Ben, I thought the raised tokens in 1.1 were the ones that had the Underworld skull on it, but were smaller than the activation tokens. That is true. They're, I think, actually relatively the same size now. So they used to be. Do I have any lying around? I do. I don't have the new stuff next to me. They are with Phil. They're with Phil right now. But yes, raised tokens were these guys. They look almost similar to activation tokens, frankly. So like they both feature the skull, the like Underworld skull, but you have this like, I don't know, like crown. This really cool like Underworld's half double. It's like the surrounded symbol, but it's all spiky, surrounding the skull on our activation tokens, and that was the case before. And then it's empty on the back, whereas raised tokens just have a spiky like crown all the way around them, and are smaller. Now they look the same as they did before. Just on the back side, you have your generic counter. Have generic counters always been on the back of wound tokens? So here's an old wound token, and now generic counter on the back of it. And the reason that's different going forward, yeah, I had that messed up before. So now they moved it off of wound counters because wound counters have a 1 and a 3 on them. So a 1 on the front and a 3 on the back to make wound token tracking very easy. And that's cool. I like that change. So yeah, they had to put the generic counters somewhere, and they decided to put them on the back of raised counters or raised tokens. So, okay. So let's see. Jonathan Benton. The warbands equal 7 may be true for current warbands, but on GW stream they said they would be roughly the same. So there may be some 6s and 8s in the future. Okay. That's worth noting. I had seen, gosh, I want to say just like on the Warcom articles, them kind of emphatically saying it was 7 as a change. Like if I remember right, Nick of Underworlds fame within the GW studio, he had mentioned that it was 7 only. But yeah, there's nothing saying that they can't mess with that number. I would be surprised if they mess with it too frequently, because it seems that the goal is if you sit down to a Rivals game, at least today, you're getting 16 glory from your Rivals deck and 7 glory from the bounty of the combatants. But those are levers they can pull on, right? They can say, hey, this deck's harder. We've raised the glory ceiling. They can say, hey, this warband is bananas, and so we want We want you to be able to score more glory off of them, or we want them to hold on to more glory in the bounty category. Totally levers, design levers that they can pull. But from what I've seen as far as like presentation of the new edition goes, they're focusing on 7 glorious bounty and 16 from your rivals decks. That made me start flipping through the rulebook, but why? What was I looking for? I tried to like do 2 thought trains at the same time. Yeah, okay. Well, next up. Let's see. Tick Tick is taken out of action, not slain when she blows up, correct? Let's see. As it gets tone packs over here. So let's see. I think I have that ability right here. Kaboom. Pick a friendly minion with no charge tokens to use this ability. That minion moves, which I think is really cool. You're not exploding where you are. You're getting to use. So when you see this skull right here, before an ability name, that means this is a core ability. So like up here, you see this lightning bolt in a hexagon. That means it's a surge ability. You'll see surge abilities always have some sort of use immediately language or score immediately language that follows them. So that's what the like surge symbol looks like to make that crystal clear to you that that's going to be an immediately ability. And then down here, the core ability. So we're choosing to use Kaboom and we're not stuck in place. And we're using this during our action step. But we get to move and then roll a number of attack dice equal to the battle round number for each fighter within 2 hexes of that minion. If the roll contains any hammer, inflict 1 damage on that fighter. If the roll contains any exclamation or any crit, inflict 2 damage on that fighter instead. Then that minion is slain. So it does actually count as your fighter being slain, but that fighter in particular, Tick Tick, has a bounty of 0. So it's interesting to note that things that care about a fighter being slain might trigger off of that, even though it's awarding 0 bounty to its opponent. Okay, let's see. Wellner, are there any warbands that you are concerned will handle the transition to War Scroll better or worse than others? I'm not worried about Exiled Dead, Wellner. Give it a rest. No, I'm kidding. So for those who are tuning in and not familiar with Wellner, he's one of my locals. He's an Exiled Dead aficionado. Like I bet you he is the person who has the most amount of reps on Exiled Dead from first edition. I liken him to the Wath Lab of Exiled Dead, where Wath Lab's love and time is on Chosen Axes. Wellner's is on Exiled Dead. But actually, in truth, if they were to translate Exiled Dead to a War Scroll, I think it would be really easy for them. I think you can really easily use the ability space to put Markov's ability there and put D'Angelis's ability there. And then you fundamentally have the Exiled Dead, and then you get what you've always wanted. You get to build with 2 universal decks instead of bringing along their absolutely just terrible faction deck. But as far as warbands translating, no, I mean, I would love to be able to say that I get to play Soul Raid as they were. I guess if I was thinking about a warband that might not translate well to a War Scroll, I could see it being them, because I would want Cloud of Midnight on the War Scroll, and I would want all of their fighter abilities on the War Scroll. One of them already has Grapple and Impact. Is Impact still in the game? Impact is not, at least in Runemark. Okay, So that's another ability that. So what impact meant for those unfamiliar was that if you charged, you would add a damage to the attack. And so one of those fighters had that before it got keyworded, and eventually it got keyworded as a thing that other fighters could have. And that same fighter had grapple, but a little bit better grapple because it could break guard. Those are, so like I can't imagine them bringing over Spine Fin. One, so you're gonna get me down a rabbit hole. The Soul Raid got pretty balanced in the Nemesis environment in general, in the sense that once Gnarlwood introduced Nemesis, it introduced Charged Out. So you had to manage Spine Fin in a new way to keep up with the person across the table. The person across the table could leverage Charged Out generally easier than you could, because Spine Fin never takes on a move or a charge token naturally. And so you have to kill or remove Spine Fin from the board. And so you had to change the tempo and the way that you played with that fighter if you wanted to squeeze more attacks out through the charged out rule. And then they didn't really have a good scoring suite. They had a couple of really good objectives, a couple okay ones. A couple of really good surge objectives, a couple of okay ones, and then some pretty bad end phases, all in all. And so they were pretty. When you would sit down to play or build a deck for them, outside of Toxic Terrors, it could be difficult. Then again, they were what I wanted to bring to Worlds, and I wanted to bring them with Rime-Locked Relics. Anyways, I have an extreme love for that warband. I would love to see them translated over in full. I can't imagine that would be true. But I think if they want to directly translate a warband over, I don't think they're going to have an issue doing so. I'm curious as to how many of them they want to reimagine, because if you think about the new edition, they are thinking about it in new ways. So they're thinking about, does this warband fit within the identity of Taken Hold, Flex, Mastery, and Strike, right? And so they might be looking at the population of those categories and wanting to shift some things around. They might be saying to themselves, you know what, I think we missed the ball on this identity the first go around. Let's try it differently. So in short, no, I'm not worried about the ability to translate existing warbands to War Scrolls. I am just curious as to what those translations will look like and how many of them will be totally reimagined. We'll see. Let's see. All right. Brian, my mod, jumped in here. Page 9, sequencing abilities, and page 22, playing surge abilities. How do we reconcile these two sections? Brian, you're a monster. You got the impish. I should have seen the impish smiley face here and known that you were going to come in here and burn my house down. So Brian and I are best friends, for those unfamiliar, and are on the What the Hex podcast together. We've talked about what he just asked in length outside of the episode today. And so, like I said, he's decided to come in and burn my house down. But to his credit for bringing this up, it is problematic. And I'm sure we'll get an official answer. So here's the dilemma. Surge abilities. And by the way, like, for rewriting a whole rulebook and like, I don't know, like, I think there's very few issues. Like, I can think of 3 total. There's surges, and if you want to ask me in chat what I mean by that, we can talk about it. Surge objectives, but I'll go over Brian's first at the very least. The timing of surge objectives, scoring, weird. Surges are a must. That's not good in a competitive environment, in my opinion, but that one is strictly opinion. And I do not like surges as a must. I think that given the lean and focus on this being geared towards accessibility, and new players and all that jazz, they say must, and this is me speculating. I think they say must because they don't want anybody to feel like they don't get what they accomplished, what they're owed. Like if you are like, oh, I missed this card. Would you mind if I score it? They want the opponent to say yes. Like that's the vibe I get. Is yes, it's a must. Go ahead, absolutely grab your surge. But to that, I would say, leave it as a may, and tell your community to not be dicks, because in all games I play, if somebody says, hey, I missed this surge, and nothing has really changed, or like them scoring that surge isn't going to change anything, I say yes. Like 99% of the time I say yes. Like I think the 1% of the time is like, maybe in a tournament, and we kind of agreed to each other. We said, hey, takesies, backsies, we're going to do as a minimum here. If I miss a surge, then I miss a surge, sort of a deal. But like, I think that they've baked a social contract into the rules by calling it a must. And they could have left it as a may and just said, don't be dicks. Because with it being a must, you can accidentally cheat. And we can start, like, if the community wants to get dickish, they can start accusing people of cheating every time they miss a search objective. And that doesn't feel good. I don't like that at all. So I think that should have been a may. And previously, it used to be way more interesting as a may as well. Like there was a card in the game, Great Gains. Like here's an example, Great Gains. I've got to try to remember what it was because I don't want to pull it up or like go through the trouble of like loading the old. I think it was if I've scored 5 glory prior to Great Gains. No, if I've scored 5 glory in the same round, then I can score Great Gains, and therefore I can score 2 glory off of Great Gains. Okay, so it was a snowball card. And because you can sequence what you score in an end phase, you could score a few points in the end phase, still have that in your hand, and then say, hey, I've scored 5 points in total this round so far, and add that on as your last scored card in the round. Very cool. But you could get to a point where you realize, ooh, from a momentum standpoint, I don't have enough gas to get Great Gains. I haven't seen Great Gains yet. I need to hold on to this surge for next round. I could score it now, but I'm going to gamble that I can score it next round and then use it into something like Great Gains. That was cool. If you're up against Hexbane Hunters, then you would think about how many scored objectives you wanted to have. Because if you had 6 scored objectives, it would score them a card for 2 points. And so you might decide, you know what? I could score this now, but I want to stifle their end phase. And finding every avenue that you had available to you to counterplay Hexbane Hunters was really important. Very strong warband. And so thinking to yourself, I could score this now, but I will potentially give that scoring to them, and that swings in their favor, and I really don't want them to score that now. If they have it in hand, I want it to brick, and I want them to have to hold on to it another round or discard it. I'll gamble that I can score the surge next round. Cool. That was interesting. Also, there were surges that said, hey, if you did this, score 1 point, but if you did this, score 2 points. And if that was a must, then you'd be stuck in that 1 glory. But it would be interesting to hold on to it and try again for that second. You're taking on the risk. You're saying, hey, I didn't score this. That's fine. I will instead sacrifice scoring it now to try to go for that bigger point score. So those are all reasons to me why must is interesting, or may is more interesting mechanically than must. But also I don't like that must can easily insinuate that a player is cheating if they're holding on to surges by the letter of the rules. And they're not cheating. And we weren't telling them that they couldn't score their surges before. We were being good community. We were being a good community. We're one of the best communities I've ever been a part of. And so, like, if somebody has a surge and game state hasn't changed, like, in a way that, like, they're taking an advantage over you to score that surge, let them score the surge. Like, that's fine. Don't be a dick. So anyways, so that was this. There are 3 things in this rule book, and I just went rabbit hole down the second thing. The third thing is what Brian is trying to burn down. So what it is, page 9. Surge abilities and sequencing abilities. Here we go. Okay, so in a section called Surge Abilities, surge abilities identified by the surge symbol can be played immediately before or immediately after an event specified by that surge ability. Cool, perfect. That seems totally transparent. They're going to specify when a surge ability is going to go off. You're going to do it. Perfect. Sequencing abilities. This is a good thing to have here because surge timing, we could both have surge timing. You could have multiple surge timings yourself. So if a player has 2 or more abilities that would be resolved at the same time, they choose the order in which they are resolved. That seems simple. I have multiple things that surged all at the same time that are all happening as a result of the same trigger. Let's say I just rolled the attack dice. There are, in Blazing Assault, there are 3 cards that score off of the attack roll. Maybe I have 2 of those in my hand right now. I get to decide, and maybe I have something else that can manipulate the dice. Well, I can say, score this 1 card, manipulate the dice, score this other card. That's all fine. And does that actually work? I think that actually works. That works. But you get to decide the order on which you resolve those abilities that are happening at the same time, that are looking at the same spot. If 2 players have abilities that would be resolved at the same time, the player whose turn it is resolves their abilities first, then their opponent resolves their abilities afterwards. So what this says is you resolve all of your stuff, and then if they have stuff as well that they need to resolve after that attack roll, that's fine. They're just going to do their stuff in full after you do your stuff. That's what page 9 says. Page 22, playing surge abilities. If both players have surge abilities that can be played at the same time, starting with the player whose turn it is, players take it in turns to play them one at a time until both players pass in succession, then resolve them as normal. Page 9. So I'm being put on the spot here, but this says play them one at a time and then resolve them as normal. And so what I think this is saying is saying I announce that I'm going to surge, right? And I don't necessarily have to announce how many times I'm going to surge, like 3 times maybe, right? But if I announce out loud that I'm going to surge, my opponent says, I'm actually surging off this window too. And so then, because I'm active player, I'll announce one of the things that I'm surging into. My opponent will then announce the other. Then I'll announce one, my opponent will announce one. I'll announce one, my opponent will announce one. So we've played them one at a time, and then until both players pass, then resolve them as normal, page 9. So that's saying, hey, go look at page 9. How do these resolve? I think now it says if a player has 2 or more abilities that would be resolved at the same time, they choose the order. And then active player goes first. So you kind of get to see what you're each trying to resolve within that window. And you're having that as almost like a discussion. Here's one I'm going to do. 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 Back and forth until pass. But then as the active player, I'll resolve everything I announced. And then the second player will resolve everything they announced. That's how I read it. That is how I understand it. It is weird. It feels at odds with each other. Especially since most of the time you're going to have abilities that happen at the same time. They're going to be surge abilities. So why do we have these two different structures for it in two different spots in the rulebook? There we go. Okay, what I'm going to do now, I can't wait to read that surge stuff myself. Jonathan Benton. Yeah, it's interesting. But I think they're all resolved one player at a time in full. I think you kind of just get to sew in a conversation. I'm, playing one, you play one. I play one, you play one. And maybe that informs something. Maybe, oh, they played that. Okay, then I'm not going to use the surge ability now. Because now you have a better picture of what's all about to resolve. That's the best I can figure there. It's definitely the most structure they try to put in place outside of the standard framework, right? You have like the framework that guides you through everything very clearly. How you take a turn, action step, power step, what combat looks like, all that kind of stuff. But they have to inject some sort of structure when we're trying to do a bunch of stuff all at once. That's all like surge effects. And so I think that's their crack at it. Wellner, it almost sounds like stackless magic. Each player plays out what they want to happen, then it resolves each card a player played in player order. Well, what's interesting is you don't have to play it in player order for sure. Like I'll resolve all my stuff, then you'll resolve all your stuff. But I don't have to play them in the order or resolve them in the order I announce them. I can flip that order. I don't think that matters, but it is there. Okay. Yeah, that is the deepest avenue of rules. Like that is the hardest thing to wrap your head around. So if you're new going like, oh my gosh, this surge structure is like, no, I don't want this in my war game. It's you're not even gonna feel it. It has not really come up much, if at all, for us, and it's never been something where we've been like, no, this actually matters. So at least out of the core box, I think it's really getting into the weeds of how it works when it needs to. Like if they don't describe how it works in that niche moment, then you don't have an answer. You don't have a way to resolve it. This is the type of stuff you don't really touch and feel often. Very nitty gritty. All right. I'm going to try to find if there's anything else I missed here in chat real quick. So excuse me while I read through chat a little. Jake, I have always pronounced his name as Mick Rat, and now I feel silly. I've always pronounced it as Mcrat because the R isn't capitalized in like exchange with the C being like lowercase or anything like that. You could be right, but I'm going to go on calling him Mcrat until he tells me otherwise. Let's see. I think I actually did a pretty good job of keeping up here. I'm already thinking, this is from Ben, I'm already thinking about making custom terrain pieces that can be placed on the blocked hexes as soon as I can get my 3D printer enclosure built. Fantastic. I will totally hit you up for such models. The hexes are smaller now, and you only need 2 of them. And like who knows if and when we're getting another board, so they should be in effect for a very, very long time. Like make sure there's magnet holes in the bases or spots for magnets, so that people can easily bring them along on a magnet tray, and you're off to the races. I think that sounds awesome. Wasn't grapple referenced on one of the new warbands, Nurgle or Saurus? Maybe. I'm just going to give that a maybe. Same with flying. I think so. There's like a grot fly. Bot fly? Bot fly, not grot. I'm getting goblin on Nurgle there. There's a bot fly in the Nurgle Warband, if I remember the models correctly. Da, da, da. Shadespire were double. Okay, so there are some wound counters that were double-sided and some that had wound. Okay, I'm not crazy there. Ollie, good to see you. Thought this was what the Alex edition today. Glad it's 2.0 Q&A instead. Yes, for those who are United States citizens here, please get out and vote. It is election day. Other countries make this a national holiday so that you have no excuse not to go vote. We don't interrupt your daily life and still expect you to get out there. It should totally be a national holiday in my opinion. But that's the most political I'll get here. But go vote, absolutely, please. Hopefully you didn't choose me over election, although I can't blame you. This is more fun. But it's important. Go do it. Look through the designer interview and they say always 7. Jonathan, update from when we were talking about Glory before. Nick may have misspoke, not known on the stream. Okay. So, and designer interview probably more reliable, but it's still a lever that they can pull. I say more reliable because if you're new here, Warcom, which is what we affectionately call Warhammer community, doesn't always get everything correct, and it can be funny, it can be awkward, it can be annoying. For the most part, they do a pretty good job of giving us enough to get excited about. But if you're relying on understanding the rules to the letter, don't ever trust a Warcom article unless it's a snippet from the a snippet from the rules direct. Wellner is excited to see the Exiled Dead deck go. Yeah. We're supposed to see like a swath of day 1 downloads. I think people have been talking about them. Well, I don't know about day 1. That's an assumption on my part. We're supposed to see downloads for warbands. And I'm curious as to what the extent is going to be. Because again, I don't always trust Warcom. But we're supposed to get a hell of a lot of them. So it's going to be really exciting to see who is on them, even if they aren't tournament legal. Like, are we really going to get Legends style War Scrolls that are just, hey, like, keep playing with your favorites, even though they're not tournament legal. Here's what we have in mind for them. That's cool. Especially if that's like a beta, like a public beta. Is like, tell us about your Legends warbands, wink wink. Like, how they doing? Did I mention before that I'm so stoked that errata could potentially be on War Scrolls? Like, I'm incredibly excited about that. And just go print out the latest PDF for your warband. I think that's fantastic. I hope that's true. Like, it's speculation on my part, but it just seems like it's there by moving all that language to the War Scroll. Wellner was thinking that GSP might be problematic. I think this is in reference to translating them over to a War Scroll, since each of them get different abilities when beast, and that's what gives the fighters a lot of their identity. Well, so there's nothing saying, yes, for those curious, first edition autos again, beasts are not in this rulebook. That is not a real rune mark that is described in this rulebook. That doesn't mean that we can't get what beast used to be on War Scrolls. Like, if the Exiled Dead come out and they don't define the zombies as beasts, then pick me up off the floor, because that changes their identity immensely. So hopefully, like, yes, beast as a general idea is gone. It's still like packaged and put around fighters where it makes sense. Like, hey, this fighter can't hold. Hey, this fighter can't have take on new weapons. You know, it's kind of bizarre, frankly, that beasts is gone, because you can give a bird a broadsword now and say, go have a good time, and they'll do as much work with that broadsword as anybody else could. I posted something like that to the new Vassal Discord, who has an amazing community leader heading it, by the way. Spinnerite, shout out Spinnerite out there. If you want a welcoming, healthy, exciting place to talk about the new edition here, there's plenty of places to go. There's various Discords. BattleMelt has their own Discord. We have our own Discord. We'd love to see you there. If you're on the mortalrealms.com, which is the page I have up right now, it's this button right here. Come join us. Is it not showing my mouse? It's not. But it's, top right. Boom, that one. It's lighting up. Come join us. themortalrealms.com. We'd love to have you. We love talking about Underworlds there. We got a channel wrapped around that. But where we only have a single channel wrapped around talking about Underworlds, there is a whole server dedicated to it at the Vassal 2.01. And so if you need, they don't like having like forever links to help combat bots. That may have been updated. I may be wrong. But if you need a link, just message me. Heck, join our server. And ask for the link. I'll give you the link, and if you leave, I won't hold it against you. That's fine too. BattleMelt has their own as well, and so you can go to like the Nemesis library and find a link to their Discord there. Highly recommend coming and hanging out with all of us talking about the game. Never trust Brian. I have to assume this is in regards to him showing up and burning my house down. And then Brian coming in saying it's niche AF. We're talking, he's trying to help reassure people, don't let surge ability sequencing scare you away. It is very niche. I'm caught up in chat. The latest here, Jonathan Betton, were there multiple war scrolls in different languages like Warcry in the box? Yes. There was. I think so. Phil got the boxes. So, yes, winky face. I think. What I can say like confidently is that the fighter cards have different languages on them, and so it seems they are trying to minimize the amount of SKUs that they have to make. And so if the fighter cards in the English box have the different languages on them for the names and stuff, then, which is another reason why they've definitely moved the language to the War Scroll, then just adding a couple more War Scrolls to that package makes it language agnostic. It also means that, like, from a printing standpoint, they only have to print the fighter cards once, and they can then print the War Scrolls in different languages. Hold deck win. This is from Wellner. I more meant that line of the ability changes. There would need to be 4 different lines of text to cover the changes to GSP, and the identity of Goral would be fundamentally changed. I followed. It took me a second to get around. Hold deck win is in commentary to me getting picked off the floor around the Exiled Dead. And then, they would have to add bits of lines of text around the War Scroll to like really bring out the identities on the Gnarl Spirit pack. But I actually don't think it would be that hard. Like, if they wanted the Gnarl Spirit pack to function pretty dang close to how they do today, you could always bring over the idea of Beast as, something to like the left of the War Scroll, and then just kind of reference it in the abilities. And you can give the fighters some different warband specific rune marks and then reference them in the abilities. I don't think it'd be that hard. Like, one of the cool things about the language being on the War Scroll too, from an errata standpoint, is if I have a rune mark on my fighter that's unique to that fighter, and I want to reference them, I guess a rune mark, they could always just use the names too. But regardless, like, let's say, I don't know, 2 of your fighters are, what's a generic fantasy term that's not minions or beasts? assassins, because those keywords, those rune marks did not make it over, and nobody's gonna miss those. So like if you were wondering about hunter, quarry, assassin, brawler, what were the others? Priest. But those things didn't come over because they didn't mean anything in the previous game unless something referenced them, right? And so if you had two fighters that were assassins, just as an example, but again, not here, on their cards, you can then say, hey, fighters with the assassin rune mark can do X, Y, or Z. So like I think there's very clever ways to make a lot of this wording work in short order on War Scrolls. Well, cool. So are there any other questions? I was thinking today we'd run about 1.5 to 2 hours. We're a little over, we're about at an 1.5 now. And so, we could naturally close the stream off here at any point. It kind of feels like it's winding down in that direction. But I don't want to just close it off like that. I want to give everybody an opportunity to ask more questions. It can be, again, on the feel of things, on the functionality of things. But, whatever you want it to be, this is your Q&A time. And I'm just happy to be chilling and hanging out as a part of it. I want to share in the excitement and add as much clarity around the new rules for everybody as I can. Which is why I thought like a Q&A format might be fun today. Just given that, if you're like super invested in the new edition, new or old player, you probably looked up a bunch of stuff yourself already. And so I didn't want to sit here and just go through the rulebook page by page by page. There's enough of that out there. The Battle Mallet podcast, they have 2 episodes on Embergard, and one of them is just breaking down the new rules, and they do a fantastic job at really concisely taking their time through the new rules. Whereas if I were to toss a little bit of criticism towards our episode, we went for a very conversational format, which I like. It adds its own perspective, its own value, but it's less like, here we're going to run down a thing. But if you want something run down like that, Battle Mountain Podcast rules episode, very, very good. They have a second episode that covers the war bands, and I'm mostly through it. I think I get to finish it tonight on my drive to go pick up my dog. Okay, so have I played a Nemesis game yet? I have. I played against Brian in Nemesis, and he was playing Zix's Tunnel Pack. I was playing the Ember Watch, and he was going for hold archetype, and I was going for aggro archetype. So what did I play? I played, I believe I played, Blazing Salt, Countdown to Cataclysm, and then he picked up the other 2 decks. So he picked up Emberstone, Sentinels, and Pillage and Plunder. I couldn't tell you the results of that. I think we played that twice. This was before, we had only played 1 Rivals game each at that point. And we just really wanted to jump into Nemesis, so bad. We didn't have a good understanding of the cards yet. A lot of the time, how I develop a good understanding of the cards is not sitting and looking at them. Behind the scenes, physically, in order for us to get a review going, we are commenting on the images of cards within the What the Hex crew. Right, that's a little behind the scenes peek. So Phil gets those images all prepared, and then we have a conversation around them. But that's not them in your hand. It's an interesting way to interact with it, because how I normally absorb cards is just hand me the Rivals deck and let me try, and I'll feel it out. And so we had maybe felt out one game, but we wanted to feel out Nemesis so badly that it was like, okay, just grab what you think like is good or bad or what you want to cut and stuff like that. And just real quick, like just gut picks and go. So it wasn't refined or anything like that. I think we might have swapped a card out a piece afterwards and been like, I didn't like this card. Let me just find something else to toss in real quick. But Nemesis was a blast. The reason I chose Blazing Assault was because I wanted to see what that package looked like without Annihilation as a supplement to another deck. And I don't think there was any rhyme or reason behind our pairings outside of I picked Countdown to Cataclysm first. He picked Emberstone Sentinels first because he's Brian and he loves his Take and Hold. And then it was kind of like, well, I think Pillage and Plunder might have a better pairing with Emberstone Sentinels, so go for it. And I'll pick Blazing Assault and do that Annihilation experiment. But man, it feels good to be able to like pull cards out of a deck and put something else in. Yeah. What is it? There is a card in Countdown to Cataclysm. Let me go back here. Yeah, this is Countdown. Okay. There's a card in here. Scoring Surge. Yeah. Scores Overwhelming Force. Scores immediately after a friendly fighter's successful melee attack if the attack roll contained 4 or more dice. I tried this in Rivals with Zickets against Phil. And Zickets don't have access to 4 dice. And this deck doesn't really do it either. So this card is terrible with them in like a Rivals format. So being able to like pull that out in Nemesis and say like, no, something else is grand. So Wellner, Surges are must score, you said. Are end phases also must score? I don't think so. Let's take a look. So end phase. Score objective cards. Check each objective card in your hand. If you have met the conditions on an objective card, you can score that card. So end phase are can. And so again, that is another point in the column of Surges should be can. They should be may. Like, why change them to a must? Why create this weird relationship with objectives? Like, you've now... I don't like it, so that's why I'm quick to like hammer on it. But overall, I'm really excited about the new edition and playing it. But yeah, when it comes to like, if I'm teaching a new player, and I tell them that end phases are can and surges are must, I'm immediately asking them to like think about objectives in a different context. Thankfully, you know, they're identified by surge, or, you know, surge score immediately. But still, like, ugh. Conquer domain win. Yeah, that was my favorite objective of like Nemesis in first edition. I'd love to see Conquer domain come back. I'd love to see goal cards like, so like Countdown to Cataclysm has a goal card. Well, what feels like it should be a goal card. I've got some commentary on it here to this end, called Spread Havoc, where it's like, okay, cool, I got this plot card that can go up to a value of 4. Awesome. What can it do for me from like a scoring standpoint? I bet I have to like get to 4, and then I can score 4 points off of one like end phase. That would be awesome. No, you can't. Spread Havoc is that card, but it caps at 2. So for scoring purposes, there actually isn't a reason to go past 2 ever. There's only a few power reasons to ever go past 2. And if this was in first edition, this would have potential to score at 4. I'm pretty confident, or maybe like countdown value -1, and then 4 is like a 3-point score. You know, sort of a deal. But like, I love chasing goal cards like that, like Reshaped Realm and stuff. So I'm looking forward to like big, interesting goal cards again. Annihilation's in here. It's big. It's 5 points. Is it interesting though? I don't think so. It's fun. Hey, that aggro player is gonna like be over the moon when they score that 5 points from Annihilation. But I don't think it is the intriguing thing that something like Conquer Domain was. For those new, Conquer Domain um, was something in a deck where you brought in extra feature tokens and could get up to 2 feature tokens in like the around no one's territory, and as long as they were within 1 of no one's territory and you got people on them, Conquer Domain was every feature token within 1 of no one's territory that you have a fighter on, you score a point for. And so you could also move feature tokens in the previous edition through different in-game effects. It wasn't something that was built in, it was something you have to find in the deck. And Fearsome Fortress brought some of that along, which is the deck that had this Conquer Domain. So you could push and move some of these tokens towards those scoring positions, and you could have some like strong wild scoring. I think my record was getting a 6 off of it one time, but generally you'd get like 2 or 3 at most, and sometimes you'd only get it for like that reliable one. It was really interesting and variable scoring card. We don't see anything in these decks yet that allow you to move feature tokens. I hope that's in the design space that they explore in the future. I think it's very interesting. It creates exciting board state changes. But nothing in there initially for that. Okay, so that was... I think that's... if anybody has any additional questions, feel free to toss them in yet. But we're going to start wrapping up. I want to wrap up on like an exciting note, because I feel like a couple of the things that we're ending on right now are me going like, oh, I wish it was this way, right? Like I wish surges weren't musts. I wish they were maze. I wish that we like something like Spread Havoc was this like grand scoring card. You know what? These are all great foundational things, though. Yes, I disagree with must, but foundationally it's saying as a social contract, let that player score that surge. Foundationally, these decks do a lot to give you starting places for these archetypes. That's exciting. Like this is a really interesting like control-y and like half hold, half aggro kind of deck. And so this can really splice in with like whatever you want to try. And then, if we go back to, here, let's go back one page. Emberstone Sentinels, amazing take and hold like starting point. Blazing Assault, absolutely a fantastic aggro or strike starting point. And I love that 5 of its budget is caught up in Annihilation, because that means that as you add other decks to this through Nemesis building, it's not going to become oppressive in the scoring potential of the deck. Because this deck, if you cut out Annihilation, is only bringing 11 along at most. And so you need to pull cards out of it to bring a scoring in from another deck. I don't think that something that improves your aggro game plan, helps those stat lines out, increases that damage, increases your reach, all of that stuff should highly reward you. If it over rewards you and helps you kill, then you're more reliably getting that bounty value of 7 and then some. And so you if normally it's hard to get that full value of 7, you make up for it in your objectives. And so you want to make sure that there's a nice balance between that when you're dealing with aggro. That, yeah, they're going to get their 7, so don't give them too much in the end phase. Or at least they're going to try to get their 7. And then Pillage and Plunder is my favorite deck of the bunch. It's very flexy. It's got a lot of like smooth, buttery scoring in there too. That can be like a good baseline for getting yourself your seed glory. But it does demand a lot of your positioning. Gives you some really good positioning tools. But if you're playing against somebody who's playing Pillage and Plunder, you'll start noticing that they're always heading for the same exact things. And so this deck brings tells with it. Like this is interesting. This is all really good. So is there anything in chat real quick that you're particularly excited about that you want me to just shout out here that you can't wait to dig into in the new edition? While I'm waiting for those to roll in, let's see. I will show the back of the rulebook, because this is what you're going to be using to teach. This is what you're going to be using to reference going forward. Let me actually blow the camera up here for you. Hello. Okay, cool. So lighting, being kind. Over here is your game sequence. This is pretty straightforward. Rounds 1, 2, 3, and then the end of the game. But then here in red are the core abilities that you can use. I'm doing this like mirrored. This is difficult to track. I'm not used to playing Vanna White over here. But this stuff is your core abilities. So it's very easy to see what your core abilities are and what you can do on a turn. Delve is down here in a box as well to explain that to you as something that you can do during your power step, and it's colored differently to offset it, and it's within this power step area. That's awesome. You've got your combat sequence over here, which runs down into combat results. In fact, that's actually the whole column on the other side. So here's what you're doing in a round, and here's what you're doing in combat. And it spells it all out very nicely for you. So this is going to be a really good tool for us to use as we're teaching people. And then if you have questions, you just flip one page and you're to that index I showed you and that legend of rune marks. What does that symbol mean? Oh, let me check the legend real quick. So it's right there for you. And we got these cool teases. I hope this is in rulebooks to come. Cool teases of warbands before we got to see the rest of them online. It's interesting to me that we didn't all get this rulebook in our hands before they showed us the rest of those. Because imagine if, as a community, we all got this rulebook in our hand, and that was our first tease at these new warbands. I think that's so cool. I hope they do that in the future. Here's one model from an upcoming warband. Your imagination just starts going wild. Like, what does the rest of it look like? What are they going to do? I think that's cool. All right, Wellner. I just want more decks to play with. I want more deck building and more interesting cards to play around. It'll be super fun to be able to build a deck and be able to swap it to a different War and W without needing massive overhauls. Oh, I see what you're saying. Swap it to a different warband without needing massive overhauls. So you can kind of really try your deck out and then tailor changes to a different warband, theoretically. Yeah, that's, I think that some people are nervous about, like, you can really bring the same deck over to the next warband. But I think that, like, as we, let's give the designers a chance to show us differently. Like, I think that there's going to be a lot of reason, hopefully, to grab a different warband and try them out. And I think you'll be like, oh, wait, because of this warband's strengths or weaknesses, I actually want these cards instead in the deck. I don't think it'll always be a 1-for-1. I think that's just going to be a good starting point. So, all right. Well, without further ado, we're going to wrap up the stream today. So before, when I was going on hiatus, I broke at the end here. Hitting pause on the What the Decks project hit me in the feels. And when I said by accident that I'd see you next week, when I knew that wouldn't be the case, that caused the waterworks. So sorry about that, by the way. So I won't hit you with be back next week as I normally would. But I will say thank you for watching. I can't wait to see you here in the future. More to come on the future of this channel. I'm not going anywhere. I want to build decks with you in Embergard and help so many new people find their initial footing in deck building in this game. Get a few decks up to Battle Mallet Library. So I'm excited for all of you to get your hands on Embergard and dive into it. tell me, like, join those discords. Tell us how you're enjoying the game. Ask us your questions as you're going. The rules Q&A doesn't have to stop now. We're always happy to help you out with a rules question on the mortalrealms.com's discord. You can best reach me in the comments below or on the Mortal Realms Discord. You can check out all the Mortal Realms Network has to offer, including a link to our Discord at themortalrealms.com. I've been Skylar, and this has been What the Decks.